All right. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to another Learning Tech Talks, where we are exploring the landscape of learning technology while cutting through the fluff. And today we are talking about some big ethereal words: digital transformation, digital adoption. We've got automation's going to be in here. I have no doubt we're gonna fit some really impressive buzzwords into our conversation. But the goal of that is to actually bring some context to that and talk about what we can do about it. How do we make this thing tangible? How do we make it real? And how do we actually do it in a way that's impactful? So I'm joined by Krishna Dunthoori, and he's the founder and CEO of Apty. Thanks for being here with me, Krishna. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for the opportunity. Great to be here. Happy Friday to you and whoever is listening and whoever is watching. Yes. For many people, probably a tough and tiring week. So, always good to, do this on Friday.
Well, you know what? This is so high energy that it doesn't matter how tough and tiring of a week you've had. This is your boost of adrenaline for the weekend. So that's exactly what this will be. So as we get into it, I always like to get to know the guests more. Now, we've had time to chat a bit, but folks watching and listening may be like, okay, Krishna, I'm not sure who this is. So let's start. I'm going to start with a slow pitch. I gave you one of the questions ahead of time, but the other one's a surprise, but you're going to be like, well, this isn't that hard. So for those of you watching as well, I encourage you to play along and comment in your answers. But for you, Krishna, where are you in the world today? Where are you at?
I'm actually in Frisco, just outside of Dallas, in my home office.
Okay.
Sometimes, my kids will come and kick me out and say that I got to watch, what they got to watch here. Though they have their own TVs in their rooms, they're like, this is the best.
Okay.
I'm like, no. But yeah, I'm in Dallas Metro.
Okay. All right. Because we were talking before, you were in India earlier this year. And okay, so Texas is kind of the home base.
Yeah.
And I can see why they might want to crash your office, because I saw your wallpaper and it looks like you have an Alienware. So they may want to just hijack your computer for gaming purposes as well.
Yeah. I mean, they control all that. Yes.
All right. Well, so I'm in Waukesha, Wisconsin, where I always am. But question 2, I'm actually really curious, because you said this was something from childhood, but also it still plays its way out in current state. So, Krishna, for you, what was your favorite childhood toy?
So in childhood, you could call this as toy, but once you grow up, it's probably no longer a toy. But
okay,
the one that I have always been fascinated and I probably can't live without is my cricket bat. I'm a huge cricket player. Now my son into cricket, and for those of you probably don't know, cricket and the grand scheme of things is probably non-existent in the US, but for some weird reason, cricket is big in Dallas area.
Really? Okay.
There's leagues, and there's. I was actually reading a couple of years ago, now it's probably grown. Over 680 cricket teams, so registered cricket teams, are in Dallas Metro. And that just blew me up. I'm like, wow.
So do you play then? Are you are you part of a league now and continue playing?
I do, but I mean, I don't get, unfortunately, as much time as I used to before. Okay. But now, I'm a chauffeur for my son, so I have no choice but to go and sit there while he's playing, but he's doing pretty good. So that always makes me feel happy. But yeah, I mean, growing up, all the kids, they used to have all kinds of toys and all, but I always remember, whatever is the big memory I have from 5-6 years old, the only thing that I always used to cry or fight for or whatever is always a cricket bat. And
always a cricket bat.
That's a cricket bat. And
okay, and that's why I like these stories, because I'm like, okay, I was trying to guess, what is it from your child that would have carried through to adulthood? I love that, and also pretty cool that the Dallas area has that big of a cricket following.
Yeah.
Well, mine is not nearly as cool or athletic as yours. I was big, and I actually couldn't decide between the two. So I get to cheat. I'm the host. I can do whatever I want. So for me, I couldn't decide between my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or my G.I. Joes. That as a kid, I was hooked on those things. I loved them. They were not dolls; they were action figures. Okay, very different. But I had the whole set. I didn't have a ton of toys as a kid, but those two things, I don't know what I would have done without them. So, and I actually still have them. They don't carry the same momentum with my kids. They're kind of like, oh yeah, really, I don't get why this is such a big deal, but they think it's cool that dad still has some of his old toys. So there we go. All right, well, now we know a little bit more about you, but I want to dig deeper into this because we are talking about digital transformation and digital adoption and all this good stuff with tech. You have Apty, you're leading Apty, but where did that come from? Like, were you in the tech space? Were you in the ops? Like, where did that come from that you said, you know what, I see this and I think we need to do something about it?
Sure, absolutely. So the need for Apty, or the need for doing something in digital adoption space, or software adoption space specifically, as I would like to call, actually came from our own need. And prior to starting Apty, though it started as a different company, Let's Nav, about 4 years ago.
Okay.
Prior to starting Apty, I started another company. This is like technically my second, company that I founded in the last 10 years, or 11 years now. So my first company, we were a boutique, SI, if you will, right? So we were implementing other enterprise softwares, and we were particularly known.
So that was the company. The company before was you were helping implement softwares for organizations. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And so with my previous company, called Xers, we were particularly pretty good and well versed within that small universe of a tool called Clarity, which is kind of a number one enterprise project portfolio management system.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, over the years, it's now under Broadcom after Broadcom acquired CA a couple of years ago. So I started even before that. Again, my background from education point of view is, I did Bachelor of Computer Applications. Then I went to Europe, studied Masters of Computer Science there, and then moved to US. In 2005. Between 2005 and 2010, I've done several projects, but I kind of grew as a solution architect, as an expert in this particular technology and solution. So when I found this gap that, hey, there's something we could do here. So I started my first company, and within the first couple of years, it grew to be a significant size with over 100 people, and we were doing at any given month like 80, 100 projects, right? So again,
and is that the implementation side? It had grown, and you were doing all these implementations.
Exactly. So that's the implementation side, and how that's connected to Apty's origin or the birth of this thing is while we were doing all these big or small, medium, large implementations, if you will, and we did over almost 400 in like 7 or 7.5 years that I was leading that company. If there was one thing common, Chris, across all of these, I mean, we did implementations for large banks and manufacturing companies and airlines, and IT companies, and you name it, right? And the common theme was, at some point, someone would come back and say, some stakeholder, say, yeah, we did this implementation, we bought this wonderful software, but we're not really seeing the value of it. Right?
Yep.
And that's a pretty loaded question, right? So because by this time, the company would have already spent, the organization would have already spent, a
lot of money on it.
Dollars to, I've been part of projects where they've spent, upwards of $5, $6, $8 million, even $10 million.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Plus all the resources that went into it. And you're not even talking license fees, implementation. It's expensive.
Exactly. And so we used to hear that, and then but we were kind of in the middleman, right? We don't own the software, and we don't own a customer.
Which is why it's a loaded question, because you just helped implement this, but it's not really your software, but they're kind of sharing some of the missed expectations they have.
Exactly. So back then, again, when I say back then, it sounds like 50 years ago, but I'm talking about like 40 years ago. And nobody was using the word like adoption.
No.
Even I wasn't using the word adoption per se. I mean, the only meaning of adoption is adopting kids or
Yep.
pets, if you will, right? But as we started hearing this more and more from like multiple customers in again like I said, different industry verticals, industry categories, but it was the same thing, like yeah, we did this implementation, blah blah blah, but we're not really seeing the value of it. We still get the reports that we can't really take a decision on, or whatever. And then I was again, I was part of this discussion, if you will, as a service provider, as a service integrator. And so the software vendor obviously is like, yeah, we got to re-implement it, or we got to sell you more features, or more, new latest version, or whatever.
Which is a real popular conversation to have after they've just spent millions of dollars implementing it and aren't feeling great about it. And they're like, you know what you need to spend more money on this.
Yes. Yes. And as I would like to call, people don't realize this until you actually put all these dots together and connect them. It's a vicious cycle. Sometimes it comes very quickly. It's a short cycle. It's a short short turnaround. For some large organizations, it may take 3, 4, 5, even like 6 years. But it's actually a vicious cycle that's pretty difficult to come out of, right? So you have this big software vendor selling you the software, big SI coming in and doing the implementation, and then you got to build all these pieces of support and training and all that. And every time this question came, hey, we're not really seeing the value from it. The answer almost 8 out of 10 times was either, okay, we got to train them more, or we got to push some more new features. And the focus was always on teaching, on training, on how to use the software. But because we were the ones who were actually implementing it, configuring it, putting the logic on the screen and taking it to the users, for me, really, it was kind of a head scratching moment. It's like, I don't think it's really that problem. I don't think it's really, people not necessarily knowing how to use the software is the problem. I mean, there's definitely some truth to it. Like,
there's an element of truth. I would agree with that. They're not wrong necessarily, but it's incomplete, I guess, is the way I would put it. Exactly. It's not wrong, but it's incomplete.
Exactly. So that's kind of what was vaguely rooted. We were living with this problem for some time, and there was an incident where we actually got to a point where the the client, one of this client, decided, after spending almost $2.5-3 million, spending a year, and rolling it out and popping the champagne bottle, after 3 months, 6 months, like, oh, you know what? Our users don't like it. We don't want to use this. This big project management system I'm talking about, and they wanted to actually just cancel it and move on.
Dump the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. And here we are, a small boutique SI, and we were sitting on a $500,000 services contract that was still to be delivered. I'm like, oh shit, pardon my
Don't worry, it's PG-13 on the show. It's fine. It's fine. There's no kids watching.
So I was like, oh my gosh, we were gonna lose a good $500,000 revenue here. We got when we started really digging through the issue, as we say here, as you start peeling the layers of the onion, the issue was really, it wasn't necessarily the software. It's how people were supposed to be using it and how they were actually using it, which later, by the way, kind of almost became our tagline, right? Okay. I remember, very clearly sitting in this conference room. The sponsor VP from the client was there, and the representatives, sales and customer success and all, everybody from the software vendor was there. We were there. I was in the room, and the sponsor from this client side kept on saying that, oh, you guys sold, a software that was supposed to be extremely easy to use. And they kept on using this word, like, it was supposed to be like TurboTax, and that's what you said, And I'm like, yeah, I mean, the reason why TurboTax is popular is you don't have to be an IT or tech savvy, and it just tells you if you do something wrong. Or
It walks you through step by step.
exactly, and that really got into my
Clicked.
head, and I took some time from this VP, offline. It's like, can you tell me like what is the problem? Why you're going to the extreme lengths of cutting the software contract? Or,
Right, completely killing it, because that's a pretty extreme move after you've invested
yes, absolutely.
a ton of money.
So then after she calmed down a little bit, what she was telling is that they have stakeholders, but there's one big stakeholder, it's engineering group
Okay.
of about
There's always the one.
4,000 users, and they were like, prior to implementing this software, they were doing like online PDFs, and also they could go exactly to the field or whatever, and they knew what they were doing. And here now because you wanted to have a centralized system, you put everything in this complex system.
Okay.
And now the user has to really scramble through, loads of pages.
They don't even know where to find. Yeah, they don't even know where to find what it was. It used to be really straightforward.
Exactly. Right. And most importantly, even if they could find, there were so many things in the sequence, right? So like, which sequence they would actually go and complete the task with. And so an aha moment for us was, okay, what if we actually identify the user by their role and only show them what they are supposed to do based on where they are in that process stage, right? That's number one. And number two, as they are doing it, we could actually because it's pre-built business logic for some of those fields. If they do something wrong,
some of it's not. It's just like if you did this, these other fields
exactly
go with that.
Exactly. And if you do something wrong as a user, we could prompt you and guide you to do the right thing. I'm like, I mean, if you could do this, that would, that's no brainer. I'm like,
then we wouldn't be getting rid of it.
Exactly. So literally we took the next couple of days and, just a simple JavaScript injection into, what we call the application layer.
The next couple of days, I just can't, I can't even function thinking in anyway. Impressive.
That was the birth of what we have as Apty, as Adapt today. So we just took like two small use cases that had maybe 40, 50 fields, and we were able to use whatever the on-screen properties, if you will, that we could find, and say we could recognize the user and show the user. And all this, the most important thing that she was worried about is, I know, but if you're going to come up with this custom solution, we're going to be, changing a lot of things with this product, and I don't know if the vendor would approve it. And then this software warranties and all. I'm like, no, I don't think so. We could do all this without.
We can do it without messing with their product,
without touching the host applications. Like, yeah, okay, it sounds good, but show me in so many words, right? And we were able to show that, and I still, till date, I remember. Her eyes were like, oh my God, I could do this, right?
Yep.
And so at that point of time, I had no idea that we would actually start a company that would become a startup on its own and all. My service integrator background was like, oh yeah, I could charge like $5,000 additional for this.
We'll just tack this service on, and then we can just kind of do it, as an add-on. But and then that went from there to why don't we just make this an actual product?
Right. So that transition or that journey took maybe another 3 to 5 months when we started seeing, not exactly, but a very similar problem in a couple of other places as well. And it's in that transition somewhere it just hit me like, oh yeah, this actually
is a product. This isn't an add-on service. This is a product in and of itself.
Right.
Okay. So what I love about this is, the story and the founding story is actually really impactful in the sense that it actually highlights a very familiar use case, which, I mean, honestly, anybody who's watching or listening, if you've ever been around enterprise software, this story you just shared shouldn't be you shouldn't be scratching your head going, I don't know what he's talking about. I've never in my life run into this issue, because this is almost every single major system I've ever dealt with. I grew up in the medical healthcare space, and the example you use of it's not the software, it's how you're using it. Now, my caveat to that is, are there times where there are not great softwares? Yes. In my career, I have had to kill platforms because I've gone, this is just not it. But I would say that's the exception, not the norm. I can't count how many times where people have complained, well, this doesn't do this and I don't like this, or it's not. And you go, well, yeah, you're not even using it right. Or, something is completely off. And to your point, a lot of the knee-jerk reaction is, well, let's just train everybody. Let's push out another module. Let's host some webinars and tell everybody, do it this way. And then they're just going to go, wow, I get it now. And it's fixed. And that again, not wrong.
It doesn't fix it.
But it's incomplete.
It just kicks the can down the road. And, for me, just teaching users or training is kind of giving them a candy, right? So it'll have its high energy movements for a little bit period.
Sure. Yep. People come out of it and they're like, oh my gosh, thanks so much. That was so helpful. And they might go back for a little bit and maybe remember some of it. And then it dips off.
It's off, right? It wanes off. And that's why this continuous, basically, not necessarily enforcement, but continuous engagement with the users. This continuous and so just to continue, what happened afterwards, right? So when we came out and when I first thought that, okay, this could be actually a solution, and I did look in the market and I found a couple of players who are doing the on-screen guidance and all that stuff. And until then, I wasn't actually thinking about doing necessarily kind of the on-screen guidance way that there is a link for it and all that. But our goal was, let's understand what the user actually does on the screen. So by role, by segment and all that. So if we could help influence the user to do the task in the right way, to perform whatever the business process in the right way. But when I saw that these couple of other products were like heavily pushing on-screen guidance, I'm like, maybe this is a easy entry into the market, right? So to get the solution, to launch the solution. So that's how the journey began. We even called ourselves Let's Nav, help with navigation and all that stuff. But to be honest, though we started as kind of, again, on-screen help navigation tool, which we do, it's table stakes for us and all that. My heart was never in that, because it's not like we are helping a e-commerce website users or single page website users just help with balloons and all. But in the software scene, the problem is much bigger. It goes way
much more complicated. So I actually want to talk about that, and that's actually a perfect lead in to where we can go with this, because this is important to think about when you're thinking about digital adoption and what we're talking about, because that example is one that I've encountered when sometimes you'll work with IT and you may say, hey, we're thinking of considering something like this. And they go, yeah, we were just thinking of with SharePoint maybe putting or injecting a couple little information buttons or pop-ups on the screen. And that's not... There's this spectrum of on-screen support that is very wide, and a handful of pop-ups with a few little tooltips. I mean, it's definitely better than I pushed out a webinar once 6 months ago, and I expect everybody to remember. So I would say on a maturity stage, it's an improvement. But the complexity of enterprise software and the different users and use cases and what people are doing in there and why 10 people might go to the same place for 10 different reasons, that is not something that a tooltip's going to fix. So let's talk a little bit about that, because again, I think sometimes when people think digital adoption, they just think of, the on-screen guidance. Exactly. Like it just walks you through and tells you a tooltip or a help tool for what you're seeing. Yes, like you said, that's table stakes. If it's not doing that, you're kind of missing out. But there's more than that. So I want to dig into that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, And every time I see or hear or read something that says, so digital adoption platform is, helping users on screen with step-by-step balloons, I kind of cringe, to be honest, right? I'm like, you're missing out on the whole thing. I
Yes.
mean, you're basically, giving a definition of on-screen guidance or on-screen user training in a fancy way and calling yourself as a digital adoption platform, but that's not what it is.
No.
Helping users on screen is a crucial part of digital adoption, but especially, enterprise software, in the enterprise software scene. People don't realize, this, Chris, that, after a while, they'll all reach a point where, at that stage, for these enterprises, people not knowing how to navigate through the software, that's not the number one problem. Most of the
No, it's
people in
not.
large organizations, they do know how to, find their way around
They'll
Salesforce.
figure out the UX. They'll over time they'll figure that out.
Exactly. But the number one problem is all of this on-screen, content, everything that you do, it might help in improving the user engagement, right? So it
Yep.
makes it easier, which is very important. But if that improvement in user engagement, if that's not resulting in your effective completion of business process, you still have a huge adoption problem.
Huge, which is why sometimes on this one, I'm so glad we got into this, because this is, I'm going to say two things and I'm going to let you get back to this, because this is where I've seen digital adoption conversations get shut down because they go, well, we built the software so intuitive, you just can navigate it. And you go, you're missing it. If you think all this is going to do is streamline the UX, that's not what we're talking about with digital adoption software. I mean, yes, it's part of it, but it's not the whole thing. And I think as a parallel, I feel the same way when I hear people talk about an LXP, and then you find out that, well, we're an LXP because we curate content into a nice interface. And you go, I mean, that's part of it, but that's not really the problem an LXP is solving. And similar to digital adoption, yes, digital adoption can help with that on-screen user experience, and that's a good thing. It's not bad. I'm not knocking it. But if that's all you're going for, it's not enough.
Right. That's just a small portion of it. And that does address, because if you take any software, right? So, in any scenario, an enterprise software, you'll have, two, maybe like three different types of users. You'll have super users who go in every day and they do stuff every day.
And they know how to do it all. They pick it up quick and they figure it out.
Exactly. So then you'll have this frequent users and infrequent users, right? So infrequent users, maybe they come once in a quarter. Yes, they do need navigation help. They forgot where the button was.
They don't even remember where to look because they haven't been in the system for 4 months and they don't remember where to go.
Exactly. But your vast majority of your user base would be this frequent users who do come in, if not daily, weekly, couple of times and all. And these are the ones that are supposed to complete, this opportunity, updation in Salesforce, or close the purchase order, in your Oracle. Or
salespeople in Salesforce is a great example of your frequent user. They're supposed to go there all the time, but they're not a super user that really knows the system, but they have to go into it all the time to do things. As perfect example.
Right. So as we started, like I said, when we came into the market, obviously we needed to find a seat at the table, as I would call, right? So with these other competitors. So we did everything that you can think of, all the bells and whistles for on-screen guidance. But my heart was always telling me that, this is not what, if you solve on-screen guidance, you solve the training problem, you solve the onboarding problem, but that doesn't equate to improved adoption. You can't prove adoption just because you created 500 walkthroughs. You can't prove adoption just because you have created 250 tooltips. What's important is, what are the process adoption gaps, right? So you can't fix something if you don't measure it, right? So if you don't measure it, then you don't understand where exactly, like, a few examples that we use internally all the time is like, if you have a large organization, team spread out multiple departments, the business process spreads across multiple departments, even multiple regions, multiple languages, whatever, right? So in that case, the fact that you just pushed all of this content to them, and they'll let them figure out on how to navigate through on screen, and then you think that you pat your own back and say, okay, now we are achieving digital adoption. You're just fooling yourself, right? So the real problem could be that the reason why Germany or Netherlands, they take 3 additional weeks extra to push a purchase order through the process versus somebody who does in UK or over in the US, could be because they have additional things as part of the process, and when they're doing additional things, they're missing out
regional nuance, exactly this, right.
So that's where, when we started building, again, like I said, we did all the table stakes. We'll continue to improve them and all that, but the focus is really on helping with process adoption and application navigation help. Combine that, and it's not about building more and more content. It's actually building less content. You should not be building 500 walkthroughs to help users, because you're assuming automatically that pardon me saying this, but you're assuming that 90% of your user base is dumb and they don't even know how to navigate through your application, which is not the case in enterprise scene, right?
So what I like about that point, and this is an important one that I see because I've spent a lot of time in system implementations, is this point you bring up where we often make these assumptions that, oh, this is how a user uses this. And it's a very generic kind of peanut butter spread approach to, well, salespeople use Salesforce like this. Like you said, I mean, that may vary by region, by division, by product. So there's a lot of nuance within that. And I like your point of, you don't necessarily want to create a million wizards to try and solve for that, because all you're doing is creating different on-screen guidance and on-screen pop-ups to try and remind people what to do, which may actually be more frustrating and confusing for someone, because they may go to this and then it asks, are you this? Are you this? And now it feels like, good grief, I'm not an idiot. I know what I'm here to do. Just help me make sure I'm doing it right.
Exactly. So the learning combined with compliance is what, when people know what to do, right? So not just how to do, but what to do. And do it right, the first time. That's what guarantees you the productivity, right? So again, how do you measure adoption? You measure adoption, by looking at how efficiently things are moving through the system, how efficiently people are able to complete. And let's say if I'm a VP of sales or VP of customer success, I'm looking at my Monday morning report, I can actually trust the data. But most of the people, don't realize that when they go to their Salesforce or whatever the system that they have, they look at the report, and if they have to pull up their phone and text and ask additional questions, hey, is this, what happening on this?
Right? Is this accurate?
Trust it, right? So that's the problem we got to fix, and that's what is truly the adoption problem, and not just teaching how to navigate through the screens. And that's where we are focusing all our energies going there. There's obviously players in the market who are doing very well with on-screen guidance and all, but our 100% focus is on helping with enterprise software adoption for medium size, large size, and big giant corporations. And again, I think the proof is in the pudding, right? So for our journey, more than 50% of our customers today are Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, large organizations that use this complex software. Is a testament to the real problem that we are out there solving.
So I want to talk about this in terms of some of the challenges that people may face in this and how to overcome that. But just to validate this point you're talking about, one of the most successful DApps that I've had kind of in my tenure was working with an organization they were pulling together dossiers that had to go to a regulatory body.
Yep.
And they changed the system that they used to do this. And to your point, the people who did it, they knew what they were supposed to do. It's not like they had no idea what information was needed for these. They'd been doing it their entire careers, but now They were using a different interface to do it. And so was there an element of system guidance? Okay, this is not a system I'm familiar with, but they picked up on that pretty quick. So for that initial change management component, it was very helpful to say, hey, we're transitioning from here to here, and here's how it works. But that dwindled pretty quickly, with the exception of new users. New users come in, and it was fantastic because we were able to say, instead of packing you through 30 e-learnings and expecting you to go to 900 sessions that we know we aren't going to host anymore, so you're going to have to go ask somebody because the initial implementation's over, we knew that they were getting the quality experience no matter when they came into the system for the first time. That was great from an initial change management standpoint. But where our real success metrics was one of the problems we were hoping to solve for in switching the system was this kind of first pass acceptance from the regulatory body. Because what would happen is somebody put the wrong thing in somewhere, and it goes to the regulatory body, and they kick it back and they go, nope. And boom, it lands back in your lap, and you're going through trying to figure out, where did we screw this thing up? And now we got to find it, and hours and resources. And this is dollars lost because now we didn't get approval on whatever it was we were submitting for. I mean, this was the whole business process component of it that had nothing to do with on-screen guidance. But that's how we knew we just saved the company in 1 year hundreds of millions of dollars in failed submissions that used to go through, would have got kicked back, and it would have taken, we might not have been first to market. I mean, there were massive business implications to this business process problem that previously there was no way to have any idea how to fix it. And this allowed us to solve for that, which was far more valuable in terms of telling the return story and the value story than, people, figured out how to do this. The validation piece was huge. So I love that we took the time to unpack that, because I do think in the industry, there's still a bit of a perception of what digital adoption tech is. And again, there's a wide spectrum of it. There's a wide spectrum. But if people are thinking all this is fancy tool tips and on-screen guidance,
it's not, and it shouldn't.
It's not. You're missing the real value of what you can do with this stuff.
Absolutely. Yep. Again, we are seeing that trend obviously slowly moving, and as you rightly pointed out, right? So there are needs for on-screen guidance where it's required. Sure. Like you have, let's say, a flower bouquet website, and you just had too many menus, and the user comes once in a year on a Valentine's Day and forgot how to navigate. That's fine. But if you change the scene to an enterprise scenario where you have your enterprise sales rep, or you have your project manager, or you have your finance manager, or you have your inventory manager who lives in this enterprise systems, whether it's homegrown, which is a huge market, people often don't understand how big that is, or you have this large enterprise applications that spread across multiple departments. The problem is really the process compliance combined with the learning of the tool, how to do it, right? And if you were to think about, Chris, right, so the process compliance part of it, if the companies or the organizations were to customize their applications to do it, we're talking about creating a million versions of oracles, because there are a million customers using a million different ways. And
not to mention the fact that every time, now that everything's a SaaS, sometimes it's not even possible. Sometimes it's not even possible. But even if it was, now every time there's a new process or a new update that hits, it blows the whole thing back. I mean, it is an absolute nightmare.
Exactly. And that problem is what really fascinated us. That again, if you think about it, right? So again, like I said at the beginning, people were not even using the word adoption, but they were describing all the problems of adoption. And the medicine that they were getting was like, take this vitamin, which is training, right? So, but if vitamin could fix whatever this big time ailments, then we all don't need any pharmacy companies or anything out there, right? But that's the problem, right? The problem was huge, and they were looking at through a small window, right? Is like, if I can just throw this training pill in there, and that's going to solve the problem. But because it has a little bit of a sugar rush, you will see the wheels spinning for a little while.
There's a temporary surge where it goes, hey, I think it did something. But in terms of the sustainable, quantifiable change that you need for it to be a success, it's not.
Exactly. And it's funny because I've been part of a few when with my first company, this company would go do this big bang training, spend again, $500,000 in classroom, virtual, and all that. Even like there were days where they were flying people into conference rooms, into this big.
Oh yeah.
Stuff.
I
know. Immediately after the training, they would take a big survey saying, and most of the people would say it was very helpful, blah blah blah, and then nobody would do anything about it for the next 2 years. And I'm like, why don't you go back to them and like after 90 days and ask the same question? You would get the real
answer. Or just look at your business process stuff and did anything get any better out of this?
Exactly.
Did. Chances are it didn't. I think, in terms of analogies, I just think, one that resonates to me that really highlights this problem is, when somebody says, I really want to get in shape. And so they go buy a bunch of fitness equipment. They enroll in a bunch of programs. They go spend a week just working out, going crazy. And they're like, they get this endorphin rush and they feel great about it. And they're on this health kick. And then they never lift another weight and the stuff gathers all this dust. And they go, well, I see it doesn't work. I can't get in. And you're like, yes, you can. But you approached it with this incomplete solution that was designed to fail.
Right. So I feel like you're talking about me about the fitness because I do the same thing. My fitness equipment definitely collecting the dust, at least from the past 2 years.
So I want to talk about this. Because one of the challenges with this, and so I'm curious, especially with as many organizations as you work with, to get your perspective on this. On the internal side, this is a good point to talk about, that this figuring out what is this business process, what are these real things, because we throw words around, oh, people aren't adopting the software. That's more common now. People aren't adopting it and things like that. And you go, well, what do you mean? And you start unpeeling the onion, which is I'm glad you brought that up because I started watching the Shrek series with my kids last night. So very appropriate. But the point with this is that, as you get into this, there have been more than one occasion where you start peeling this onion back and you start saying, what is the process? Like, help me understand what this should look like. And sometimes that can be met with, not real clear answers that you can even action off of. How do you help organizations work through that? Because that can be a real challenge when it comes to whether you're talking digital adoption or even just trying to figure out how do we do business process improvement. Sometimes that hurdle of, do you know what the process should be or how you really want this to go? How do you help folks with that?
Absolutely. So, there are a couple of different ways. Again, without getting into the mechanics of the tool, the solution. Like I said, because we were living this problem by ourselves, we were seeing how customers were struggling with it. And the point that you brought, sometimes the same process is 15 different things in the same company. So one of the things that, we at Apty do very efficiently, and we are continuously improving as part of our enterprise, software focus is, if we can help the process owners, the application owners, these are not necessarily technical people. I'm not talking about IT department and
like a BPO. There's usually somebody who's the business process owner who owns what the process should be.
Exactly. So we have created ways and tools, and we are continuing to improve them. As part of our solution. within minutes. We're not talking about like days or weeks of development, or within
this
minutes.
isn't like a 6-month consulting thing.
Exactly. So you will be able to go and create kind of these activity process paths, right? So first of all, if you take an application like Salesforce and an Oracle, like there are different ways. You can go to the same screen, you can go to the same let's say a process in multiple different ways. There are multiple different ways the user can get there, right? And there's always a preferred way that you want the users to do. That's one thing. But when they're actually doing the process, depending on their role, their department, their region, their wherever they are, whatever they're doing, there's multiple different flavors of it. So we have created these ways to easily track and monitor, and also in kind of an anonymized way, right? So because of the data security.
Okay. So almost a way, if I'm going to reframe this, because I love where you're going with this. If I'm framing this correctly, is almost a way to anonymously, again, for data privacy reasons, but actually observe how is the system being used, which I'm seeing you nod, which is fantastic, since that's the way you're framing this, because a lot of times so many assumptions are made. Oh, no, this is what people are doing. Oh, this is how they're using it. Or the BPO goes, well, this is how the process is designed. And you go, yeah, right. And then there's the elephant path of how are users actually doing it. But oftentimes that's a vacuum or a black hole. You don't really know what's happening.
Exactly. And it's funny you say that, because I've been part of certain situations where a small group of people in a conference room would assume and take a decision on behalf of 30,000 users, and how they're,
because they had some sticky notes on a whiteboard. It's like, see, this is what the process is now.
Exactly. And again, no offense to them. I mean, they're limited.
They're doing the best they can.
Exactly. So they're limited with what they have in their hands at their disposal. But they have really no clue of exactly where the problem is. It's your assumption. And sometimes you will have stakeholders who have the loudest voice, then they'll say it's not working for us. I'm like, okay, man, just to make them happy, give them more features, or give them more training, or make their screens whatever you can, or just take the work from them and do it manually by yourself, right? So I've seen all kinds of things. But again, that's counterproductive, right? So what's the point of implementing an enterprise grade software to streamline, to centralize, and to again to make it easy to productivity, but you don't.
So this piece, and I know I may be like hounding on this one more than maybe some people might be like, why are you making such a big deal? But this to me is one of the cruxes of where you start to differentiate and say, not all dApps are the same, or when we say digital adoption, we're not necessarily saying the same thing, because this is some of that under the hood stuff that doesn't necessarily catch your eye on the storefront lot, because you go, well, this is actually the core of where some of the problems is. Because one of the examples you just brought up, I've got a couple of them that immediately come to mind, where you've got a stakeholder that either has a very personal attachment to what the process is or whatever, and they're that loud voice in the room that says, no, this is what we have to do. And when you're in the ether with no data really saying what's going on, it kind of turns into just an argument over whose opinion is the strongest or who makes the best case versus here's the data. Here's what is actually happening in the system, how it's being used today. I don't care what you think or what you wish it was. This is what's actually happening. Now, how do we optimize that? Because we know that's not getting the outcome that we want.
Absolutely. I mean, you kind of nailed it there, right? So and that's exactly the theme and our kind of North Star that is driving us, Chris, if I can say it that way, is we firmly 100% believe that the problem, or the solution rather, for all of your software adoption, technology adoption, problems lies within the data that you produce day in, day out. You're not using it, right? So that's what we just, make it easier for a non-technical person to use. and combine that with, because if you think about it today, again, if you want to use the word digital adoption solutions or digital adoption platforms, this is kind of not a new solution. This solution exists in 10 different ways or 10 different parts in organizations already. There's something for training, there's something for support, there's something for change management, there's something for new feature release, there's something for
there's an analytics team that's doing something.
Exactly.
Yep.
But the problem is, because it's so divided and again presented in 10 different ways, there's no one actually able to get any value out of it. They're trying to solve the problem of software adoption, and especially in enterprise software scene, in silos. And that's the reason why, and because there's no other way that they know, right? So they know that, okay, when I have an enterprise software that I'm rolling out, that I'm responsible for, I got to rely on L&D to frequently training, but poor L&D is always backlogged with 6 months worth of work, and poor support is always backlogged with, because they are not the process
customer service tickets. And
you are left with going back to either your SI or the software vendor. I was once a SI, so no offense to them, right? They're always out there to see, okay, how can I make more money out of this, right? So there's nothing wrong in it, right? So they're like, let's propose.
It's their business.
Let's propose a re-implementation. So for us, really, what brought all this together is that if I look at, in an enterprise software scenario, there's not one solution that a CIO can rely upon and say that, okay, this is exactly how my software investment is being used, adopted, and I'm getting the value because it's solved. I implemented, for example, this ITSM, and it's been a year, and we have reduced our customer support issues by 50%, 60%. There's nothing that they can do other than the usage reports that the software vendor,
unless they really want to try and go out and pull all this together. But the thing, so what's interesting about this, okay, where this conversation is going, and I'm going to try and predict where some people's heads might be going with this, because we're talking about the fact that this is happening, but it's very fragmented and kind of scattered throughout the org, not consistent type of a thing. And so I have no doubt someone somewhere is going to hear that and go, so a digital adoption platform then it's coming for my job. Okay. And I've been in these conversations. Oh, it's coming for my job. And I'm interested your take, but to me, I've said, actually, no, it's not. If anything, it's going to help inform the role you play in a meaningful way. So instead of running on a treadmill and getting nowhere because someone's going, we're not getting what we want out of the system, but I don't have a clue why or what to do about it. So I don't know. Everybody go do a thing and let's hope something happens. The system's actually creating a meaningful way to say, here's what is actually going on. Learning and development. Here's where there's an opportunity. Change management and comms. Here's an opportunity. IT. It's actually informing it in a meaningful way, not taking it from folks. I think it's a reality that sometimes people face when they think of these systems that come in and capture all this data and automate some of these things is, oh, great. Yeah, it's going to take away what I do, and it won't.
Absolutely. I mean, that's an important point to address for sure, because every time there's a new, technology, solution or innovation, whatever that's coming up, right? So there's always some perception and often probably a misconception, in some people that, man, if we do this, I don't have work anymore.
Right.
But if you do it right, again, within the context of digital adoption that we're talking about today, if you do it right, first of all, it not only helps to do their job better, right? But most importantly, for all of this siloed solution that I was talking about, by bringing this visibility, by streamlining what they're doing and all, our aim, and again, if it's rightly used, is to turn the reactiveness to proactiveness. I'll give you a quick example. For L&D, most of the time, unfortunately, it's backlogged work and it's also a reactive work, right? So we got to prepare this training and all that stuff. And by the time the training comes out, the process is already
too late.
Too late, right? So and people start, I'm like, the screen already changed, the process already changed,
Right. We already did a UX fix for what the thing you just came up with the training for.
Exactly. So you're always up in this catching up mode. And again, we at Apty, that we are on this mission to, again, your digital adoption as it stands today, unfortunately, is more reactive. But
yes,
if you do it right, digital adoption should be proactive. Don't help the user after user forgot how to do stuff, after they made the mistake. What is that you can do? Because you have been observing this user, you know this process, you know your system well, and it's been 6 months that you have been doing this already. What is that we can do to actually prevent the user from even making the mistake? Or
let's stop them from making the mistake before they even make it. And that's where you want to get to, and you still play a critical role in that. That's the thing. It's not taking that away. It actually elevates the value and the role that you play.
Exactly.
You're just playing it differently. So
exactly. So on that, I mean, again, how you do that is not necessarily just throw a bunch of on-screen guidance and all. It's all part of it. You got to have, I mean, first of all, if you don't, analyze again, and there's a big misconception about usage tracking tools. There's probably a million that, even Google offers one for free that can just track, the click stream, right? Every type, every keystroke that the user does. There's no use for that. You don't need that. You don't need to know that 10,000 people are logging into Oracle every single day, and somehow you take that, as a sign for, people are using, the software well. No, that's their job. People, when they come, opening their work tools and keeping them open is their job. So you don't measure that engagement as a sign of, improved adoption. But you got to be able to analyze. You got to be able to analyze that, whether my process productivity improved, whether my process, efficiency improved or not. If not, how many different ways that you can start. I mean, and part of it is on-screen guidance, part of it is the tooltipping and all that, part of it is really on-screen validations and stuff, and part of it is really aligning these two together and continue to help the user to do the best thing. And that's what, in my opinion, digital adoption platforms and solutions should be, and not just confine themselves to.
Yes. And you know what? I told you we were going to run through the time because I feel like I'm just getting into it, but I'm really glad where we hit today, because this is a really important conversation to have on this. And there's a lot of value in this for folks who may be considering something like this, who to date may have been trying to focus on selling the value through on-screen guidance, or, getting people to understand how to, and not that that's a bad thing. Like we said, it's an important component, but there's a lot more meat and a lot more capability built into this that can tell that value story, that can actually help influence the people who really may have the decision-making power on, hey, I'm not saying we stop doing what we're doing. I'm saying let's do it more intelligently and more proactively. That's not threatening to anyone. I think that anybody would say, yes, we'd love to get to that point. And I think that can really help folks who may be struggling to say, I kind of get it, but I just feel like, and I've had this, IT just doesn't really have an appetite because they can do on-screen tooltips. Okay, well, then stop only selling the on-screen side of it, because that's not really the problem they're dealing with, and you can speak to it. It's just that's just part of it. So with that, again, we could end up going on for a couple more hours if we needed to, but I'm gonna wrap us on that, because I think that's a really good place for people to walk away and go, hopefully this changed what you think about when you think digital adoption, technology. Like when you think of that, hopefully you're now thinking much deeper and much wider about what that means and how you can use it. So I am so glad that you were able to join me today, Krishna. This was a really, really fun and meaningful conversation. Hopefully everybody who watched got something out of this. And again, this to me is one of the most underutilized pieces of technology in the people problem stack right now as it comes to things. We keep rolling out new systems. We keep rolling out changing systems, trying to fix this. And I don't think we have to the way we are if we do this right. So thanks for joining me. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the opportunity. And most importantly, thanks for educating the people. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.